Welcome back to another episode of the Cyber Queens. I am your host, your only Cyber Queen for today. My name is Meryl Vernon, also known as She Who Hacks, resident ethical hacker and offensive expert. Also, low-key brag, this year's Cybersecurity Woman of the Year, Hacker of the Year. So that just happened last week in Vegas. Speaking of Vegas things, yay me. The other queens, Amber and Erica, are out doing SKO things today. I don't know what that means. George possibly does. But we will have them back, of course, next week. I am joined, however, today by my dear friend, good homie, fellow podcaster, and badass, George Kamide. George, please introduce yourself.
Yeah, George Kamide. I'm on the product side of things, usually in product marketing, but also here as half of Bare Knuckles and Brass Tacks.
Woo! Tell us what that is real quick.
Yeah, so I'm George on the product side. My co-host is George Akora Asiso, and we both got tired of the distrust between vendors and buyers in cyber, and so we started a podcast to talk about that. So mostly about sales and marketing, what to do, what not to do, and how to build that trust. Because us, the two sides hating each other, doesn't make anyone safer.
And I say that thing about red and blue teams all the time. Us not working together isn't helping anybody.
Yeah, 100.
Speaking of things one should not be doing in the sales world, we are here to talk about several things today. First, we're going to get into Hacker Summer Camp. This happened last week. Some high-level takeaways, what we're going to do differently next year. And then we're going to get into one of George's great specialties that he's known for out there on the interwebs, AI and machine learning. So I'm excited for that. So first, Hacker Summer Camp. So recap yours for me. Where did you go? What did you do?
Yeah.
For those members who've never been or aren't sure what it is, real quick, it's a series of cons that happen all in the same about 8 or 9 day period. Diana Initiative, BSides Las Vegas, Blackhat, DEFCON, SquadCon, and many other cons in between. All right, go.
Yeah, I was out there for the first time as not a vendor, so the first time in like 5 years. And so I did a lot of those cons. I missed Diana Initiative just because of the way the plane came in, but I was there for BSides, Blackhat, SquadCon, DEFCON. So that was Sunday to Sunday last week.
I was there Sunday to Sunday also. I was there for Diana, which was on Monday. It was last year it was 2 days. Today, this year it was 1. So my mentee, Mac and I spoke, and by Mac and I mean she also had plane delays because of that beast happening the storm happening on the East Coast. So she came running into our talk, literally running in, like the whole audience cheered and everything. It was great. Everyone knew she was delayed. It was very sad to have her. We really wanted to have her speak with me, but we did what we could. We'll probably be re-releasing that. I did do Diana. I did Diana, Blackhat. I hit Blackhat pretty hard. I was at DEFCON very lightly. I was only there on Saturday. At SquadCon, which was a fabulous new con that just had its inaugural year. Yes. Yeah. The quality of those talks. The people who were there socializing, hanging out, just giving away their expertise was fabulous. Hackers and Heels, Stacey Champagne had a salon there where a lot of people got to have some great in-depth conversations. So that was one of my personal favorites. What about you? What were some of your favorite moments?
Yeah, I hit Blackhat really hard on the floor and ran into a lot of people, which is crazy when you consider how many thousands of people are there that you can kind of turn a corner and run into people you know. But I was also at SquadCon and got asked to guest MC, which was an honor. But the speed with which the team at Black Girls Hack assembled that conference in 60 days, like you said, was really amazing. Top shelf sponsors, Google, Microsoft, Amazon, and also top shelf speakers. And also Stacey, shout out for Hackers and Heels, how quickly she put together that killer salon was really amazing too. Yeah, it was a vibe.
It was beautiful.
Gorgeous.
Yeah, we'll throw some images down in the get bigger, the salon get bigger, more women at con. All right, let's take it con by con, our phases throughout the week. So you came in on Sunday. I did Diana. Diana was super great. I got to meet a lot of the higher ups at JP Morgan Chase in their cyber exec world and cyber recruiting. Fabulous team of people. We all went to dinner together inside the Venetian, which was wonderful. And then I had a very chill night. I was back by about 10:30 and in bed by about 10:30.
Yeah, good for you. I was at BSides. I wanted to see a couple of friends who I knew were either presenting there or might be there. Ran into 2 Michelles I know who were just fabulous people. That was great. And yeah, I was tuned into a lot of the AI stuff there. But yeah, and then I saw Professor Roger White, who was also hanging out there and helping out. And then it was on to Blackhat. So for people who don't know, the problem is a lot of these conferences overlap. So like day 2 of BSides is like you gotta get to Blackhat and get your badge. And when I say get to, I mean like get in an Uber, who I paid a small fortune to. I'm just like ignoring the amount that I paid Uber. And
I think I'm a minority shareholder in Uber now at this point,
sure.
basically.
Yes. And then you're just getting from like hotel to hotel. So I think I stayed for BSides morning second day, and then I booked it over to Mandalay to get the Blackhat badge and see some other people.
Yeah. So it's a constant juggle of I got to be here at this time slot in the morning, then I got to be here in the afternoon, then I'm hoping to run into these people, and then I want to run into this person.
Yeah.
Usually at cons, I'm like us at RSA, I'm expecting to specifically run into them. Like, what booth are you near? I'm in the 2800s. And then this year, I happened to run into my old boss from Zoom, Andy Grant, about 4 times by pure accident. Wow. Ran into him on the expo floor, ran into him outside at the Ubers, ran into him at Diana. Like I was like, how am I seeing you 4 times? That never happens. That never happens.
No.
I got lucky to run into you at the Huntress booth. Like that was magic.
Yeah,
we all decided to
and that was the thing. You might
be
running around, and I ran into my good friend Ange, and then we kind of did the expo floor together. But in that time, ended up running into a bunch of people. Also, is great. It's really like I can't emphasize how priceless it is to have that face-to-face with people, not just the friends and familiars, but you get to meet people who you might have been following or you're fans of their work, and you just get that time and you can discover that, oh, I have a lot in common with this person who, you know, I had on a pedestal because I've only observed them from afar. And that's just the magic you can't replicate online.
No, you can't. I feel like so many of my relationships get better when we get to hang out in person because you know, you just get to have those sidebars. You get to play off each other's ideas. It's just different being there in real life. My career really started taking off when I got to do the IRL things because I became a hacker during pandemic year when everything went remote, which was fabulous and not great at the same time. It was made a lot more things accessible, a lot more resources, and people became accessible. Cons went virtual. You know, I got to attend talks on my couch, but I didn't get to do the networking bit that I truly cherish. So that was a bit of a miss. So Blackhat was crazy.
I was going to say, for anyone listening, like, it's one thing to meet your quote unquote heroes or people that you admire, but it's quite another thing when you get into conversation and you start to think of like things you can collaborate on, you know, be it a podcast or a paper or a CFP. And then it's like, oh, wow, like that's the connective magic. That's really incredible.
Really. I feel like so many great ideas are hatched and projects come out of people just sitting, you know, at one of the after events together. How many after events did you do?
Too many. I think I was getting
too many.
I was getting in bed between 12 and 1 every night, which is good. I was trying to be more like you, but for some reason, Beast Coast time would not leave me, and I kept waking up at 6. So I was at the end of the week, pretty ragged.
Your time.
Pretty ragged, yeah.
Yeah. So my DEFCON last year to this year, my summer camp last year to this year, totally last con didn't attend the con things. I was just like extracurricularing it up, right? If there was a brunch, a lunch meetup, a after dinner meetup, a club meetup, whatever, I was there. I was out until like 2 or 3 in the morning, all the nights, which was fine. I had nowhere to be the next day, kind of thing. I was maximizing the networking, but this year I had to speak 4 times, and I stacked them all Monday, Tuesday, and then all the way on Saturday. So I was like, I have to behave this week, or not only will my wife fly to Vegas and murder me, but like I will not have it in me to give these talks at the end of the week. So pro tip from me, don't talk at the end, talk at the beginning so you can just get it over with. So I was in bed by probably about 9:30 most nights, and I lost my voice day 2, like the professional that I am. So if you ran into me anytime after Tuesday, because Tuesday was the United Cybersecurity Alliance Cybersecurity Woman of the Year Awards. My best friend won, Nikki Robinson won, Dr. Danae Brooke and he were there. They did not win their categories, but they were finalists, which was amazing to have them there with me. So we all went out, Nikki and I, after we both won, we like lost all of our decided to have really in-depth cybersecurity conversations in a very loud casino. So I lost my voice, and then for the rest of the week,
there's no way you're not losing. There's no way you're not losing your voice. I mean, you're always in some crowded bar or something. Everything's loud. I mean, it's Vegas.
Yeah. It's just
actually,
the nature of Vegas.
if you only lose your voice in Vegas, then you've done something right. So think of it that way.
I know. I felt so bad because then everybody wanted to talk to me, and I'm like, I'm so sorry. Not only am I saving my voice to try and get it back by Saturday, but I sound like this for the interview we're about to do. So I apologize. So to Chris and Caitlin, cybersecurity girl, and Bronwyn and the Upticks team, and everyone that I talked to, I apologize that my voice sounded like I smoked 20 cigarettes a day. Thank you for bearing with me.
Well, we might have inhaled 20 cigarettes a day in the secondhand smoke from the casino, but that's a different matter.
That is so valid. Super valid. Okay, so what were some of the trends you noticed? Either topics covered in talks or sessions. Obviously, there was a big AI presence this year. Yes. There was AI Village. But what did you notice? Some trends, some things you want to call attention to?
Yeah, I noticed a lot of AI hype at Blackhat on the expo floor versus at DEFCON. It was more the security applications and offensive side of AI. So let me really generalize, it felt like blue team Blackhat, red team DEFCON, like if I had to cut it that way. So really interesting. So when you talk about Blackhat, the defensive posture is more about like using AI, machine learning, whatever, to improve detections. But at DEFCON, it was more almost red team and developer side, because where a lot of the companies are looking to do, they're being told like, we need to develop AI, and the CISOs are all being tasked with find a way to securely enable this. And DEFCON seemed to be the better place to have those conversations. Like, what are the security layers that we need? How do we keep the data segregated? How do we not dedupe or API our way into a model and then have it leak a bunch of stuff? That discussion was on the DEFCON side.
Yeah, I would agree. As I walked around the floor, and I was really interested in getting to know a lot of the vendors in Startup Alley. I love knowing who the next big guys are. And also, the biggest solutions aren't necessarily the best fit for SMBs and startup size companies. So I noticed a lot of application security just in general. And I would walk up to someone and be like, what do you do? We are the 20th people today to tell you that we do application security. I'm like, oh, like all of it? Or like, which part do you specifically address? Yeah, all of it, 24/7, total assurance, zero trust, all that. So I noticed a lot of that. And there was also a big emphasis on API security.
Yes.
And secure code, a lot of code analysis tools, a lot of data tools. So that was really cool to see. It became more dev centric, I would say.
I think those three things make perfect sense when you consider that landscape of enterprise AI development, right? So code review, obviously, because now it's something absurd, like 80% of people are using GitHub Copilot. So they're using AI to generate code. And how are you going to assure and inspect that code? AppSec for sure, because dev teams are being asked to build maybe on open source models or publicly available models, or God help you develop your own model, but you're going to have to get security layered in there. And then API, 1000%. Anyone selling you AI anything, APIs are the arms and legs, right? So for example, Google, Microsoft, CrowdStrike, they all have LLMs or generative AI, large language models now built into the UI. You can just ask it to do something, reverse engineer that. That's just you in the UI, but the way the tool does something is through APIs. And I think API security is going to be like very hot for the next 5 years, because it's not great right now. And when you start talking about models that are not only touching and interpreting your data, but changing it, so that's like the whole CIA triad, like that becomes a really big issue.
Yeah, and for the technical audience out there, the CIA triad is the confidentiality, integrity, and availability of data. It's where most of what we do in information security, where the pillars where all these efforts come from. And for those of you who don't understand why API security is so important, it's kind of been one of those frontiers where we all use APIs and know we have APIs, but we don't have great oversight and visibility over our API attack surface, right? It's kind of like third-party risk. We're like, we know it's a problem, but we don't know how to address this. So, but your APIs or your applications all talk to each other. You have one tool ingesting data into another tool, that's API driven. All AI communication is API driven. So it's a big issue. So if you want to get into cyber, into something hot, pick API
Yes.
security. That's
Red
going to be a
teaming and
hot one.
APIs.
Absolutely.
That's the kit and
Absolutely.
caboodle.
Couldn't agree more. What about other not so good trends you saw on the sales expo floor side of things? Let's talk about it. If you follow George at all, you know what we're about to talk about.
Yeah, so
not afraid of a spicy topics.
No, I'm not. So I don't know if it's because I was sort of closer to the socialization being there on my own rather than with the vendor, but the rampant sexual harassment was a real eye opener for me. And I think that sounds naive. And I want to talk about it in two ways. There is the harassment of individuals. So, anyone who's female working in cyber, basically that entire week I talked to had at least one or two incidents in varying degrees of annoyance to severe. And then the vendors engaging in really sexualized marketing. I don't necessarily have to name them here, but if you see some of my posts, you'll see people have tagged them in the comments. So, one of them had really fitted shirts on young women that said, "Follow me into the dark." I mean, what is that?
My app is so tight.
Yes, yeah.
What does that even mean?
I don't know. There were jokes about like full frontal, but it was like a play on words with like visibility into assets, and obviously there's a play on words there. It's just awful, and it needs
total
to stop.
asset nudity.
Yeah, it needs to
stop.
It's just garbage. It's just garbage marketing. It's lazy. There's no excuse for it, and it's really alarming too, because I know a number of female CISOs. So like, I don't know why you think that's going to win you all the customers when like there's a good chunk of female economic buyers. So from a marketing perspective, alienating that base is not really smart. I am heartened to see and hear of security leaders who straight up went to those vendors and were like, yo, I am not going to buy your product. And I'm going to tell all my friends not to buy your product. And anyone who works for me is never taking your calls. So, marketing ROI on that show, through the roof, guys. So I think we can do something about the vendors, like intense market pressure. I said today on LinkedIn that I have made it my personal mission to haunt any brand that does that. I will just be up in your face all the time, and I'm going to make it really uncomfortable for you. As for creating safe spaces for our female colleagues and our non-binary colleagues, that is a much larger task. Kudos to SquadCon. That space was super inclusive. The vibe was creative. It was collaborative. It was amazing. But in the other instances, especially like the bars, I'm trying to work through some ways. Obviously, none of us on this podcast can just like solve toxic masculinity and chauvinism, but at least on a tactical level, like what are there things we can do at these shows that provide either a safe haven or just like an escape valve, right? Like I got to get out of here. Like I don't feel great. What is that mechanism?
Thinking of starting like a pre-SquadCon non-binary like meetup next year as in Blackhat after event at some point. I obviously did not have the bandwidth to put something like that together this year, but and I didn't hit up many of the after events this year either, but I can say I heard the stories. I can say there was one vendor who hired contortionists in pink jumpsuits to simply go around tumbling their legs everywhere. And I just feel like there's a venue for that and there's not a venue for that. And if you got to rely on something like that to get people to your booth, then your product just must not be that good.
Yeah, your tech is garbage sauce if that's what you got to do to sell it. I'm sorry.
Yeah. So, it's one of those things. At Blackhat, I felt very confident. I felt very, okay, walking around by myself, being on the floor, asking questions, having tough technical conversations. At DEFCON, I was a little intimidated, and that was my first time because, again, last year I lobbyconned.
DEFCON is intense. Both. It's an intense scene.
It's intense. Sure. There's a lot of intense people there. I just felt like I wanted to shrink to everybody, and like this friend showed up, Joe Hall. Kudos to you. A friend, someone I could with and just like not be.
I would say you could probably run Blackhat solo and you'll run into friends and you'll sort of glom on the groups and you can be invited in. Shout out to Upticks for totally letting me just join your team dinner. But DEF CON's, you want to go with somebody because it's also DEFCON is spread across 4 hotels. It's a huge number of people, and I don't know how to solve that problem because a lot of the hackers pay in cash day of, so they don't have like a way to understand the volume of people who are going to show up ahead of time. And it can just feel super crowded. It's an intense thing if you're not used to the hacker community. I mean, you got everyone from, you know, polo shirt exec all the way to like the furries and the hackers who show up in cosplay, and that's, you know, whatever it is, good on them. It's a safe space, but it's just a lot. It's a lot of
It's a
sensory
lot.
input. And I would
Yeah.
definitely suggest having a friend and understanding like how to navigate the villages, because it's just a really different experience than your usual trade show.
Yeah, and that's why I tell people going to RSA, going to Blackhat, going to DEFCON, if you see me, feel free to glom onto me because I probably need a buddy. And second of all, I got where I am by having someone let me glom onto them at one point. So
yeah,
feel free to approach me in person. Those of you who do for it, thank you so much. But yeah, and then when I went back to SquadCon, because I was speaking in the afternoon that day, I went back in there and I walked in and the space is all nice and it's nice and open, and everyone, I was like, oh, I know people here. Yeah. These are my people. Everything feels better. You know, like it just was a very welcoming environment. I can't say it enough. It was phenomenal. It was phenomenally done, especially for how last minute it was put together. So yeah, kudos to them. What are you going to do differently next year? What is your plan going into summer camp next year? If you return, will you return?
I will definitely return. I think I'll just, well, one, I'm going to create an autonomous AI agent of myself that will attend virtual sessions so I can actually be in more places. No.
Wow. I will be, way to burn the candle at 4 ends.
Yeah, I'll be
well done.
I'll try to be more judicious. I know I was warned, like, look, you got to block your time. I foolishly still thought I could get from hotel to hotel faster than I really could. And then maybe
it takes about an hour and a half. It takes an hour and a half. Give yourself an hour and a half. Like in San Diego, LA rules. LA rules.
Yeah. Okay? Yeah. Well, not helped by the fact that they're like repaving the strip for F1, and I totally forgot they were doing that. So that definitely threw a
the week of summer camp.
Yeah. I would just also program in like downtime, like just like maybe in that liminal period between the talks ending and then you want to go do stuff in the after. You just got to get like cool the nervous system, bring the temperature down. It'd be much better for mental health and reflection. But what I would do differently, I'm gonna try and finagle a briefings pass. I only had an expo pass, but there were some talks that I missed at Blackhat that I think I would have liked to have heard. But yeah, just pick your poison. If you go with a friend, you can divide and conquer, because sometimes there are 2 talks going at the same time and you're like, I wish I could be in both places, and you can if you send a friend. So
yeah. Also keep in mind that you're going to meet people who are like expo heavy. Like I don't go to the talks at all. I only hit the floor. You're going to meet people who are like, I don't touch the floor. I only go there to pick up VIP passes. Otherwise I'm in briefings all day. People who just lobby con it up, just network.
Yeah.
I would say that I chose to hit the floor super hard. The sessions are recorded and I can go back and watch them because I have my business pass. So that'll give me access to those recordings. So that's why I picked that one. I think next year, again, I'm not going to plan to speak as much because I really wanted to maximize it since I was going to be there and be away from my family, but myself more and not be so concerned, like as all are, right, with our performance, and we're talking ourselves off the ledge in the green room, and you know, and that it was insanity. So I think I'm going to do less is more. And I think I'm just going to have a dedicated day to be in one location. So I'm not going between locations as much because you do lose a lot of time, and that's difficult. But sometimes the little events you want to be at, like I went to a Creators Guild meetup for cyber creators. That was fabulous. And it was all the way in the Cosmo, which isn't affiliated with any of the Blackhat DEFCON activities. So, you know, that was, you know, you just got to get an Uber, you got to go. But, you know, that's just one of those things where, to me, the little events mean more to me than the big events sometimes. So I didn't go to any of the big after parties, any of the big meetups.
Yeah. No, like
I
think I on a whim registered for a bunch, like the level up party and stuff like that. But then I realized like I can have like 30 versions of the same awful small talk conversation in a really loud room, or I can just go hang out with these people that I only see but twice a year. And so I always chose that. So I would double down on, you know, deepening the connections you have rather than just trying to meet everybody and get 1,000 cards and like going really broad and shallow.
Yeah, I would agree. So high level takeaways before we move on to AI, because I know everyone's dying to hear your thoughts on this topic. So what are your high level takeaways? Anything from this year, anything in general for summer camp?
Yeah, if you're going for the first time, the rule is always like, get good shoes and for the love of God, break them in before you go. You are walking vast distances in these casinos. Get your hydration plan in order because you need water all the time. And I guess the high level takeaway is you will get more out of these conferences the more you give to the community leading up to it, right? So I think it's safe to say now, I ran into a friend at BSides. I was just saying hi. And he was like, hey, have you eaten breakfast? And I was like, no, I didn't get a meal ticket. And he's like, well, you fed me in the past before. I'm not going to let you go hungry. So he let me in to get food, which I am eternally grateful for. But that's the sort of reciprocity you get in person, but it's only by virtue of building up and giving throughout the year. So do that.
Yeah. My goal, my takeaway would be to always bring packable food with you, like energy bars or little things you can take and eat, because the only thing you'll see on the floor is pastries and lots of espresso stations. You don't see a ton of water and you don't see nutritional food. And you're like, no. I can't leave. Each of these demos takes 15 minutes. I got to meet at least 30 vendors. Like it takes all day. And the lines get insane, especially in the food court and at Starbucks. So bring the food that you want to consume with you. Bring nutritious food with you to last you throughout the day. And, hydration and liquid IV.
Yeah, I see in the comments, Ashley calling out liquid IV. Yeah, girl,
liquid IV is life.
I had a packet for every day.
Liquid IV is life. I did two a days.
Yeah. Yeah, it's the desert, people. It's like 104.
Yeah. Oh, it got cooler. It was like 111 one day. And then my other takeaway would be like to understand how you intake information. Do you prefer to be with a small group of people? Do you prefer to be in bigger venues? Do you prefer to be in sessions? And like based on how you feel comfortable, what everyone else is doing, because that's what they like to do. It's very easy to like have your summer camp derailed by group mentality.
And I would sorry, one last thing. If you're running into people and you get these ideas to collab or whatever, like you really got to bake in that time at night before you go to sleep. Just like write it down. I don't want us to go so far as to say journal, but like there's so much and there's so much potential, but you can also like lose the thread. Like you can forget to follow up because you just didn't write any of this stuff down, right? So make sure you're taking notes.
Yeah. I'm going to bring out an actual notebook next year. I thought I would do it all on my phone. Nope. Only whipped out my phone for pictures. Like horrible. So
yeah, I don't remember as well. If I type on the phone, it's all handwritten for me.
Yeah. So do that. All right. Moving on into AI and machine learning. So excited. Caught George's talk at SquadCon, which was fabulous. He is one of my go-to authorities just in the content he produces centered around a lot of the themes about AI. Not an AI developer himself, but just someone who is looking into the trends, looking into the applications of it, and calling attention and a spotlight to a lot of the concerns no one else is talking about. So George, tell us about why you got drawn to AI, what your general content about it has been, and some of your thoughts about it.
Yeah, so I was working for a company that was training social engineering detections first on, at the time, GPT-2 and then GPT-3. And GPT-3 is, for the AI nerds, like that's the moment. I mean, for the general public, it was Chat GPT, but GPT-3 was the light years advance in large language model capabilities. And it really got us past what's commonly called the scaling hypothesis, which was if you just add enough data and compute, you can get to a more generalized intelligence. And when I saw how accurate that was when we were running our social engineering stuff against it, that's when I had this like cold sweat, was like, oh, the future is going to be vastly different than what I imagined. And I was mostly concerned for my kids, like what are they going to need to know to be able to be a productive member of society in the future? And so I've been reading about AI pretty much for nonstop for like 4 years. And then accompanying that, I was running podcasts where I was interviewing a lot of CISOs and security leaders. And so I just detected this gap between what seems to be the tide coming in and where we are today in practice. And that's where I try to think about these things, is sort of the socio-technical overlap, and especially what it means for teams and defense.
Yeah. And I love that because it just kind of goes to show how someone can be authority and again, be context and application of something without being an authority and how it's built. So can you give us, for those of us who couldn't have done, some of like the high level points from your talk about like the skills and the experience needed to begin understanding and interacting?
Yeah. So I divided my talk into 3 sections, right? And it was all about adaptation. So how do you adapt to a changing environment? How do you adapt your skills that you have today? And how do you adapt your thinking, which is arguably the harder thing to do, but will be the most advantageous if you can do it. So I will start with the environment. So AI is changing everything in cyber, not just because of threat actors, and we can talk about like potential threat scenarios, but also because of what it will do to the scope of security teams' remit. So right today, enterprises have their data, it's stored, locally, cloud, whatever. Protect that, protect the interactions, protect the employees. So in my talk, I equated that to a car. The business is the car moving from point A to B, its growth target. Security is access controls, the doors, the seat belts, all the safety mechanisms to keep the cargo, the people, the data safe. The new wrinkle is that as companies look to onboard AI into their internal business processes to drive revenue and growth, now you, as a security team, by way of analogy, are going to also be asked to protect the engine, which is kind of a completely new piece, I think, to the way we think about things in security. And that is, I think, Meryl, why we saw so much AppSec and API layers, because that's getting into the guts of how a business operates. And so when you think about that, I think a lot of people are like, well, I work for this huge bank. We're slow and cautious. From the vendor marketing side, so anyone here in the chat who's on the vendor side, about the technology adoption curve. And we usually have early adopters on one side, and we go up to the majority, and we make a lot of money, and then we IPO, and then the what we call the laggards on the back end of the curve, which tend to be huge Fortune 500 companies that have thousands of employees. They're slow to move, slow to make changes. Then we go to those last. AI is completely upending that model because the savvy agile teams are just going to build it themselves. There are plenty of open source models. They can DevSecOps their way through that, and they will do that because it'll give them the ability to leapfrog their competition. The huge enterprise players have the expertise to build it, and sure, those processes might be slower to turn, but the enterprise software they use, like Microsoft, Google, and even Salesforce, are getting AI features built in natively. So like whether they like it or not, they're using AI tooling or soon will be. And when you think about Slack, for example, they've got Slack GPT, and you're like, oh, cool, it's just an LLM inside of Slack. Well, yes and no. Your Slack is connected to all these different apps. I mean, that's why you have it, right? Your Atlassian instances, your Jira
Integrations.
instances. Yeah.
Google Drive.
That's where these APIs come in. So now the security team has to evaluate, what is the due diligence around the risk behind having that feature in Slack? And if it's sort of on by default, what does that mean for the enterprise? So I think that's really changing things. And then when we think about skills, I was encouraging people to build on what they know. So, MITRE ATT&CK, but do you know MITRE Atlas, which is their new AI framework? NIST 853 or 171, maybe NIST CSF, but do you know the NIST AI risk management framework? And so I have some resources that I can share, but I think it's like build on the skills you have, and then you will have to learn some foundational things. Like you need to know, like, what does one hot encoding mean? What is a 3-shot learning trial? The reason you need to know that is because the vendors are going to come to you, and you got to be able to ask the smart questions that really test whether they're selling you snake oil or not. And so that's the people who can do all of that, who can think about all of that, are less vulnerable versus the people who get like really single threaded on one discipline. Like, I get it. You came in as a junior pen tester. You want to graduate to red team. That's great. You can still have your technical expertise, but you got to know what GRC does, and you got to know how your work is going to affect them. You got to know how it affects the blue and purple teams. You have to start getting like super cross functional, because the machines will take over the analysis, but they will not take away the orchestration. That's where the people who can think and talk and communicate effectively will have a job in the future. If you just want to do analysis, the machine's going to do that for you.
And I love that you said that, because so many people come to me and ask me, like, do I see certain aspects of pen testing being phased out by AI? And, much sooner, in the next like year or two, rather than in the next, 5 to 7 to 10 years. And I'm like, oh, absolutely. But when I've said this before in my journey. So when I went from being a pen tester, new job a year into that, he was like competing to keep me, and I was like, sir, I don't know if I'm worth it to you as a red teamer. Like, purple teaming, yes, that I absolutely am worth. And I was like, but as a red teamer, like, I'm your most inexperienced red teamer. He's like, exactly. He's like, a red teamer I can go out and replace. I know how to replace red teaming skills. That's easy. He's like, but you bring risk and cloud and BCP and all these other things that your coworkers, your other red teamers just don't understand. He's like, so I would need like 3 sets of skills to replace you, because I took that, I call it the total restaurant mentality. So don't just become a server, be the host, then be the food runner, then be the busser, then be the server, and you'll understand how it all works together. Right. And that makes you a more well-rounded server.
And also, like, on a very pragmatic note, if somebody were to leave the restaurant, you could slide into that. You can put your hands up and be like, I can do that, or I know how to do that. Right. And you become infinitely more valuable.
Yeah. You can also pull double duty if someone's out, right? Yeah. You know how to like work in plating your own stuff, food running your own stuff, food run for someone else in between your tables. Yeah. Like you begin to understand so much more of the org as a whole. Can't advocate for that enough. Love that.
So
and I also love what you said about.
Well, I was just going to say, in cyber, we say people, process, technology. So if you had to take anything away from all the stuff I just said, it's everyone on the show floor is talking about technology. It's really about process that's going to change. And just to illustrate this, I saw this post before I left for Blackhat that was like, it was a poll, and it was something like, hey, you got your firewall detected an unknown executable file. You have 1 week to figure out, what do you do? And it gave you a bunch of choices, like involve other teammates, whatever. And I was like, are you kidding me? Like, you're going to be able to extract all that code and understand it in like 2 minutes. So this whole like week-long timeline of like, what would all those choices out the window, everything changes, right? So if you can threat model in 2 minutes, but it took you 2 weeks to do, like, what does that mean? And that's what I don't see happening. I don't see people thinking about, how is this going to impact our processes? And I think security leaders in particular at the executive level, I mean, they just don't have the bandwidth to think about it right now. They're dealing with SEC changes. They're dealing with ransomware, tidal
privacy
wave.
law.
And so, yeah. And so like now the people who are in the seats, like, this is your time. If you can learn this, if you can apply yourself to this, you are in a better position to ascend into leadership, because they're going to look for your help. They're going to look for someone putting their hand up and be like, I think I have some ideas, I've been reading about XYZ. And so that's what I want people to take away, is like, don't fear replacement. Look for the opportunity in this challenge.
Exactly. In fact, you had a question in the comments from the one and only hacker and heel herself, Stacey Champagne. Any favorite books to read to bring oneself up on AI, especially on the security side of AI things?
Yeah, I would highly recommend, I'll do a book and an article. So I'll have to share the link to the article. But the book is The Alignment Problem by Brian Christian. It was actually published in 2019, but it is the most definitive context and history of like the beginnings of machine learning to where we are today, and all of the attendant philosophical problems associated with it. At DEFCON, I saw the most amazing talk by Adrian Wood, who is actively red teaming and compromising publicly available machine learning models and riding those in to companies that install them. And the problem that he highlights is that models sit right close to the crown jewels. I mean, that's the value, is that they're interacting with that data. So he could get in on the model, he could detonate at both the training and the compute phase, loot everything, and get out, no detection. So cutting edge. It's a serious problem in the next 2 years, and we have zero defenses against it. No EDR is going to detect that. It basically ends up saying like, oh, the machine learning model is doing machine learning. Like, it cannot detect that malware.
Right.
So share that in the chat after, but that is like, that's the thing. That is the juice. That is the present day problem that we're going to face.
Yeah, I can't echo some of those sentiments enough. It's like we already had enough trouble detecting certain anomalous things, right? Like if we're gonna go
Yeah.
heuristics wise, behavioral analytics, and understand
Yeah.
like based off what this user typically does, this doesn't match. That might be malicious, but like the language learning model, what is its baseline?
There's no
It's kind of
baseline.
like dealing. It's like dealing with polymorphic malware,
Yes.
but that can
Yeah.
recognize and program and adapt to its environment itself, right? Like
Yes.
polymorphic on steroids. Like, by the way, rootkits have been a problem for decades. We still don't have an answer to rootkits. Sometimes the
Correct.
malware is just so good and so bad we don't have an answer.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I'm excited to see how that manifests in the coming years. We're almost a great time. So given that we have to wrap it up, my simple ask to you for your final takeaways would be, please weigh in on the tale as old as time, 2 weeks old question of what verticals do you see AI having a significant impact on, like phasing out, and what verticals of cyber do you think people should focus on, especially those looking to break into cyber or looking to maintain and pivot within cyber to help maintain their careers? And then just leave us with any final thoughts on AI in general.
Yeah, vertical wise, AI, large language models are coming hard for customer support. Anything CPG, retail, all the stuff where they have to engage one-to-one with the customer. That also includes digital platforms, dating platforms, whatever. That's all easily replaced by large language models. The best companies like IKEA aren't just rip and replace. They slide the language model in for customer support, and they actually end up training their support staff in something else. So IKEA took like, I want to say it was like 8,000 support staff in Southeast Asia and retrained them to be interior designers, which adds value to their company, because now like the whole like I lost my tracking number stuff can be automated, but the what looks best with this, like that adds value to revenue, and I think the most inventive companies are going to do that. Sectors to focus on, even if you don't like the technical aspects of pen testing or hacking, like understanding a red team mindset is absolutely critical. And if anything, the public has benefited from AI is literally the term red team has now entered the popular imagination, right? Everything from the White House sponsoring a red team challenge at DEFCON to all press about these models being red teamed, and they have to explain what red teaming is. So it's kind of get on that track. And then I think, as we said, like, API security is huge, because anyone trying to sell you AI tooling has to probably, depending on the architecture, rely on an API. If they don't rely on an API, it's kind of a red flag, because it might mean they have to like actually touch or store your data. I mean, that's the reason they want to use the API, is so that they don't have the liability of holding your data. So those would be the areas to focus on. And then I would highly recommend looking at NVIDIA's red team methodology, because it's the best example I've seen of cross-functional work, where GRC is working with engineering, is working with red team, is working with ethicists. So that would be a good resource too. Just really do your meetups, meet people. If they're in a different discipline, like really learn. Don't just double down on your area of expertise. You got to learn what everyone is doing.
You mean there are organizations out there doing collaborative, holistic security beyond purple teaming?
Imagine that.
Such a happy day for my purple team heart. No, I love to see that, and I love to hear that, and I think those are great things to keep in mind. My takeaways for the audience, given that I'm not an AI expert, but that I learned a lot from the AI expert, would be that one of the number one things he said in his talk that I took away was that AI is going to outphase again a lot of those things that we can automate already, even in pen testing, right? We want to automate as much as possible and free us, the humans, up to do the creative thinking bit, the manual validation bit, the how can I daisy chain vulnerabilities bit, and that's the bit they'll never be able to take away, right? They can't take away that strategic thinking. They also can't take away the truly human communication. Even nowadays, you look at a blog post, you can see what was very clearly spun up by an AI and what was very clearly written in-depth research and put together by a human. So those soft skills, soft side of cyber, are going to become very, very crucial. Everyone needs to be a better human to each other.
Can you explain? I would say the litmus test is, can you explain what you do to your mom? And can you do it without any of the acronyms or the jargon? So if you can get that far, that means you can communicate with a business executive who sits outside of security, because then you bring real value to the table.
We think those things set us apart, and they do give us certain acumen with certain technical audiences. We can communicate in all acronyms if we want to, but you need to be able to take yourself out of that mindset as well.
Yeah.
Going to be very, very crucial for us coming up in the coming years. Might be something that George hit on earlier that a lot of people don't consider. Things like Slack GPT, like how many apps do we integrate with Slack? And people always think of API as like a one-way communication. It sends communication, API sensation, but there are two-way APIs, right? Like literally the TCP of API communications, where it's a bi-directional communication.
Yes.
And I mean, you can literally tie in active alerting from your AWS environment through like Athena and CloudWatch and things like that, and have them start alerting you in Slack, and built Slack bots literally just to alert you on incidents and conduct incident response in Slack. So if an AI has access to that, they could literally just reverse backdoor your entire cloud environment. So like attack surfaces are now also overlapping and mixing in with each other, and it's getting murky in there.
Yeah,
so
I don't know if it's
I
don't know if it's an attack surface anymore so much as like an attack tesseract. I mean, it's like a 4-dimensional cube like folding in on itself. So
continuous attack Tesla ball, like it's a Tesla ball, like it's everywhere.
We should copyright that and totally take up a booth, like protect your attack tesseract. Everyone will be like, what? And they'll be there.
What is that? Anyway, so those are the things that we hope you keep in mind. Those of you looking to break into cyber or maintain your jobs within cyber, we hope you heed some very valuable and forethought advice. Be proactive in your careers, be proactive in your niches and your learning. Thank you so much for joining us for this episode of Cyber Queens. We have truly enjoyed having you here, and all the wonderful comments we've got. I'm going to have George back like next week, because this is the most comments we've gotten literally ever. And we just want to say thank you for spending your time with us. If you like the content, please like, share, and subscribe. It's the easiest way to support us, and it's absolutely free. If you hated the content, come at me in the comments. I'll take the engagement. Other than that, we will see you next week. This has been another episode of the Cyber Queens. George, thank you so much for joining me today, because my queens left me by myself and people would have had to listen to me drone on and on.
Such a pleasure.
Where can people find you in your podcast?
Yeah, you
Tell
can
us where we can find you.
Yeah, Bare Knuckles and Brass Tacks is available wherever. And you can also follow the LinkedIn page for super snarky memes and other things. But Meryl, always a blast. Loved hanging out with you last week. Loved hanging out with you today.
Yay! Just can't get enough of each other. With that being said, we will link all the fabulous resources we talked about in the comments, the books, Hackers and Heels, all the cons and everything. We wish you all the success out there on your cyber journeys, and we'll see you next week.
All right.
Bye. Is it going to come on?